Hi guys, I'm Alex. Thanks for clicking and welcome to this advanced vocabulary lesson on 5 adjectives to sound smart. So in this lesson, I'm going to be looking at some uncommon adjectives that you can use in your speech. And the adjectives I have chosen are understood by most native English speakers regardless, but they are a little bit more advanced and a little bit more formal. So let's look at some sentences, some vocabulary, and see if we can understand what these words mean. The first one is maudlin. So you can listen and repeat one more time. Maudlin. All right. So let's look at the sentence. Looking at old photos makes me maudlin. So if you're looking at an old photo album of your childhood or your friends from elementary school or high school, how do you generally feel? I guess it depends on what kind of experience you had when you were a child. But in this context, I wanted it to mean like overly emotional and sentimental. Okay? So the meaning of maudlin, we're going to put overly, and that is supposed to be a V, overly emotional, and I'm going to put a plus for and sentimental. Okay, so you can say, for example, drinking makes me maudlin. So if you drink too much and you start thinking about your past and your history and you get very emotional, almost like teary thinking about it, you feel very maudlin. Okay? The next adjective is lackadaisical. It's a very fun word to say, so say it with me. Lackadaisical. Okay, so sentence. Her work has been very lackadaisical lately. Even when you think about the word and the sound of it, like lackadaisical, it kind of sounds like lazy in a way. And that actually is what it means. So lazy and careless. Lazy and careless, without care. Okay, so if I ask you, hey, how was your weekend? Was it productive? And you can say, no, I was really lackadaisical, or I felt very lackadaisical. A person's work can be lackadaisical, meaning that, again, lazy, careless, not a lot of attention paid to it. Okay? All right, the next adjective is interminable. Okay, so say it with me, interminable. Okay, so his complaining is interminable. Now, when we look at this adjective, you might see in the middle, terminable, termina. Okay, what does this word sound like? It almost sounds like terminate, right? Now, with the prefix in, this makes it negative. So, not terminate, okay, not ending. So, if something is interminable, it's almost like it's endless, or at least it feels like it's endless, like it's not going to end. So, his complaining, the way he complains is interminable. He always complains. It doesn't end. So basically, never ending, or it feels like it's never ending. Now, at the time of this video, we are in the middle of winter in Canada, and it's still going on. It's March, and some of us are starting to feel that this winter is interminable. It's not going to end. This is 2014, by the way, at the time of recording. All right. Fourth, egregious. So, very, very useful adjective. Sorry, but your logic is egregious. So if someone gives you an explanation for something, and the explanation, the logic is, that doesn't make sense. Like, if it doesn't make any sense, it is egregious, which means incredibly bad or terrible. Okay? So, let's say very bad. Normally, we talk about logic being egregious or a statement, something a person says as being egregious, which just means it's just wrong, okay? Now, we don't really use it to talk about people. Like, you can't really say he is egregious, he is really bad. Normally, it's things or actions that are egregious, things you say or your logic is egregious, okay? And finally, we have the word visceral. So when we look at the sentence skydiving, which means jumping from a plane, is an incredibly visceral experience. So imagine jumping out of a plane. How do you feel emotionally, physically? Well, you probably do feel very emotional and your senses are, engaged. So if something is visceral, it's emotional and instinctual, which means that your senses are very much engaged during this activity, whatever it is. So you might often hear this in promotions or commercials for movies. So you might hear an action movie being called a visceral experience or a visceral ride, which means it's a very instinctual. It appeals to your instincts, attracts your instincts and your emotions. Not logical, not reasonable, but it appeals to your emotions and your senses more than anything. Okay, guys, so one more time. Maudlin means sad, depressing, sentimental, okay? Lackadaisical, lazy and careless. Interminable, never-ending. Egregious, incredibly bad, a person's logic or something they say. And visceral, emotional, instinctual, appeals to your senses. So one more time, guys. Let's just do some pronunciation before I go. Maudlin, lackadaisical, interminable, egregious, visceral. Nice job. So if you'd like to test your understanding of these 5 adjectives, as always, you can check out the quiz on engvid.com. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you next time.